Hello and welcome to one and all. In today's class, we will check out the next 5 marks question, importance of price elasticity of demand. That is SAQ 17, point out the importance of price elasticity of demand. In the previous class, I have explained to you what are the various, what is the meaning of elasticity of demand, what are all the various kinds of elasticities of demand, and what are all the various kinds of price elasticity of demand, and of course the determinants of price elasticity of demand. So the next 5 marks question is the importance of price elasticity of demand. So the price elasticity of demand has got several practical advantages to the businessman, to the government, etc. Okay, so that's why we will check out what are all the various uses or benefits in having the knowledge of the price elasticity of demand. Okay, so as usual, first let me briefly explain the importance, then we will come back to the answer. Okay, so first, how it is helpful to the monopolist. So who is a monopolist? You know that he is a single seller. So single seller in a particular market for a particular commodity or service, and that commodity or service is not having any close substitute. So that seller is a monopolist, isn't it? We all know about it. So for this monopolist, the knowledge of elasticity of demand of that commodity, of a particular commodity or service which he or she is selling, is will help the monopolist to practice something called as price discrimination. So one of the basic motives or main aim of the monopolist is to get maximum profit. So whatever methods it is necessary, he will use all those methods to achieve that goal, that is to get that maximum profit. So one of the methods of getting that maximum profit is to practice price discrimination. So the meaning of price discrimination is different prices for the same product or service will be charged in different markets. That is, from two different batches of consumers, two different prices will be charged, but the commodity or service provided will be the same. So one higher price from one batch of consumers from one place, and lower price from another batch of consumers from another place. Okay, so this is what is called as price discrimination. Now why he has to charge higher price in one batch of customers, and why he has to, how he is able to charge higher price from another batch of customers? That is because of the differences in the elasticity of demand for that particular commodity or service. Okay, see, let us take the example. A monopolist, a seller is selling any clothing industry, okay, boutique or clothing or apparels. So he will charge a higher price for the same dress, for the same apparel, where whichever area which is having the inelastic market. Normally in all the posh localities and all, the demand will be inelastic, because the posh locality, the people are reasonably wealthier, so they don't mind paying higher prices for that dress or clothing or for that apparel. So that monopoly, the seller, can charge a higher price in that market. But whereas if you take the outskirts, people are not that much wealthier, so they will purchase only when the prices are low. Okay, so he will charge a lower price in that market which is having that elastic demand. Okay, so in the outskirts and all, the same clothing or the apparels will have the elastic market. He will charge a lesser price and the sales will be more, whereas in that posh locality, for the same clothing or the dress, he will charge a higher price because the market is inelastic. Okay, so in that way he will practice the price discrimination. Two different prices will be charged, and in both the markets he will get the maximum profit. So in this way, it is helping the monopolist how much he has to charge in the elastic market and how much he can charge in the inelastic market. Okay, then the next advantage of the elasticity of demand is something called as to fix the prices for the joint products. Okay, so joint products, there are some of the commodities which will be, there will be a byproduct if you are manufacturing certain commodities. Say for example, sugar and molasses. So during the manufacture of sugar, the molasses will automatically there will be another product derived, which is the byproduct, that is the molasses. Okay, byproduct in the sense, this is a waste product actually. Okay, So this is in the process of manufacturing of sugar, this waste product will be delivered. Okay, now but for the sugar industry, this molasses is a waste product or the byproduct, but this molasses is the main ingredient for the manufacture of confectionaries. Okay, so all the confectionery items, the raw material required will be molasses. Now, if the sugar industry wants to sell the molasses to the confectionery industry, how much price it has to charge for the molasses? Because there is no cost for the molasses. Normally, how the price is charged over and above the cost of production. But this molasses is derived by the sugar industry without any cost because it is a byproduct. But if it has to sell this molasses to this confectionery industry, some price the sugar industry has to charge for the molasses. It cannot give the molasses for free. Okay, but without knowing the cost, how much price will be charged by the sugar industry? So in that case, how the industry charges the prices for the two joint products is that based on the elasticity of demand. Suppose if the confectionery item is having that inelastic demand, then the prices charged indirectly the molasses will also have the inelastic demand, so the price for molasses can be higher. But if the confectionery items is having the elastic demand, then the price has to be reduced, so the price for molasses will also have to be reduced. So both for sugar as well as the molasses, separate cost cannot be calculated. So in order to determine the price for both sugar and molasses depending upon the elasticity of demand for the final product. If the final product derived by this sugar and molasses is having the elastic demand, then the sugar and molasses can be sold only at a lesser price. If the final product derived by this sugar and molasses is having the inelastic demand, then the price for sugar and molasses can be increased. Okay, so in that way, the knowledge of elasticity of demand is helping to determine the prices of the joint products separately. Okay, now the next advantage is the knowledge of elasticity of demand is also helping the government. So the government, how it is helping, can nationalize the basic welfare services like railways, RTC, etc., as they have inelastic demand and declare them as public utilities. See, now there are certain kinds of services like all this railways, RTC, post and telegraphs, water supply, power supply. So once upon a time during the British rule, all these services in our country were under the private sector. Okay, so once India attained independence, the government had taken over from the private sector, that is the government nationalized. And why the government has to nationalize it? See, I've given the example here. Example, you take Indian Railways. Okay, so Indian Railways, we all know that it is a government monopoly, and because it is under the government, the common man is able to travel. Okay, but imagine if it is under the private sector, say instead of Indian Railways, it is called as the Reliance Railways. So if it is under the private sector and it is called as a Reliance Railways, is it possible for common man to travel through India to the railways? Because it is not possible, because the price will be very, very high. Private sector, normally they charge very high prices. So this is a very, very essential service. All these essential services, they are all having that inelastic demand. It is Indian Railways is having the inelastic demand. So people have to travel, there is no other alternative. So like that, all those essential services, post and telegraphs, railways, road transport, power supply, water supply, all these are the essential services. So what the government can do, the government can declare them as public utilities. So any commodity or service which is in the hands of the private sector and which is of utmost importance for the general public and are having the inelastic demand, the government can declare them as the public utilities, and the government can nationalize those services. That is, the government can take over from the private sector, because the government can provide that basic welfare services by charging lesser prices. Okay, So this knowledge of elasticity of demand is helping the government to identify which are all the products or services which are having the inelastic demand and are very very essential for the general public to nationalize. Okay, so in that way the knowledge of elasticity of demand is helping the government. Now next importance is in the area of international trade. You all know what is the meaning of international trade, isn't it? Exports and imports of goods between the countries. And when this trade is happening between the countries, there is something called as the terms of trade. That is, on what terms trade should be carried out between from one country to or between one country to another country. So the terms of trade, to put it very simply, 1 unit of cotton from India, if India is exporting 1 unit of cotton to Bangladesh, how many units of jute can be imported from Bangladesh? That is, 1 unit of domestic commodity is equal to how many units of foreign commodity. That is what is called as the terms of trade. Okay, imagine for the international trade, mostly like a barter system. Okay, if in the barter system goods are exchanged for goods, isn't it? So it is like that. So 1 unit of our commodity can be imported to any other country, and we are also importing certain commodities from that particular country. How many units you can import from that particular commodity? That is the terms of trade. Now this terms of trade between the two countries is fixed based on the mutual elasticities between the countries. Okay, so maybe cotton is having the inelastic demand, Bangladesh has to import cotton only from India, or jute, India has to import jute only from Bangladesh. Maybe jute is also having the inelastic demand, or both cotton and jute might having the elastic demand, or one commodity can be elastic, one commodity having the inelastic. So based on the mutual elasticities between the two countries, okay, accordingly the settlement will, there will be a settlement between the countries. On that basis the terms of trade will be decided. Okay, then the next one is the to the Ministry of Finance, how it is helping the Ministry of Finance. One of the main jobs of that Ministry of Finance is to earn more revenue out through taxes, has to impose taxes on those goods which have inelastic demand to earn more revenue. Okay, so if the government levies the taxes on commodities which are already having the elastic demand, and if the prices, if the taxes are levied on those commodities, what will happen? The price will still increase. A commodity is having the elastic demand, and if the government imposes taxes on that particular commodity sorry, the prices will still increase. So if the commodity is having that elastic demand, what the consumers will do? The consumers will stop purchasing. So what will happen? The government will not get the required amount of revenue. On the other hand, if the government is imposing the taxes on those commodities or services which is having the inelastic demand, even though morally it is not correct, ethically it is not correct, so on those but still in order to earn more revenue, if the government imposes taxes on those commodities or services which are having the inelastic demand, the government target of realizing the revenue will be realized, because even though the price is increasing because of the imposition of taxes, the demand will not reduce. So that's why given some example, vehicles, we all know it is having the elastic demand compared to petrol. If the government imposes taxes on vehicles, then the government revenue will be less because the demand will reduce. On the other hand, if the government is imposing the taxes on petrol, the government can realize more revenue because the petrol is having that inelastic demand. The rise in prices will not decrease the demand. Okay, so it in this way it is helping the Ministry of Finance. Okay, the next area in which the elasticity of demand is useful is the to the management. Okay, the to the management, there is something called trade unions. You all must have heard about it. Trade unions is the voluntary association of workers looking after the welfare of the workers. Okay, so now one of the main target of this trade union is to provide fight for higher wages for the workers. Okay, the trade union, apart from demanding all those the basic amenities to the workers, apart from all that, the main target of the trade unions is to fight for higher wages and fetch higher wages for their workers. Suppose assume that the demand for workers by the management is inelastic. So that means what? there are some 50 workers are working in a factory. So if these 50 workers, they are having the inelastic demand from the management, that is the management has to work, the company has to work only with these 50 workers. The company cannot find this kind of workers anywhere else. So whatever the wages they are asking, the management has to pay, that is inelastic demand. So in that case, the trade unions can fight for higher wages and it can be successful, because the trade union, they know that the management cannot find this kind of workers anywhere else. So the demand for the workers from the management is inelastic. Then in that case, if the trade unions fight for higher wages, they will be successful. On the other hand, if suppose if these 50 workers are having the elastic demand, that means what, the management can find alternative workers. Not necessary only these 50 workers are necessary to be employed. If they are demanding higher wages, the management can say that I will not pay the higher wages, I can look after someone else. So in that case, even if the trade unions fight for higher wages, it will not be successful. Okay, so if to put it very simply, if the demand for workers by the management is having the elastic demand, the trade unions fight for higher wages will not be successful. On the other hand, the demand for workers by the management is having the inelastic demand. In that case, the trade unions can fight for higher wages and they will be successful. Okay, then the next one is the prosperity in the midst of plenty. Actually, in your textbook, it is given prosperity in the midst of plenty, but the correct thing is poverty in the midst of plenty. Okay, so poverty in the midst of plenty, because plenty is there, at the same time poverty is also there. That's why it is a paradox. Paradox means something unexplainable. If you are having plenty, I mean, if the sellers are having the plenty of output, then that means what, the revenue should also be more, isn't it? That's what we understand. If there is more output, if the sellers are able to produce more and more amount of output, if the production is taking place, if the sales are happening, then the sellers will also get more revenue. That is logical. But in some cases, even though the production is more, if the volume of output is more, still the sellers are in poverty. So that is something unexplainable. It is a paradox. Okay, so there are two ways of getting maximum revenue or profit to the sellers. What are all the two ways? Either the seller can charge high price, but in that case the sales will be low. Okay, all those commodities which are having the elastic demand, what the seller can do, he can charge higher price, but he compensate with low sales, or the low sales are compensated with high price. Okay, or otherwise what the seller can do, he can reduce the price but compensate with more sales. So if the seller wants to increase the sales, the seller has to reduce the price. So either with more sales the seller can get the maximum revenue, or with high price the seller can get the maximum profit. So these are all the two ways the seller can get the maximum profit. But this is happening in the industrial sector. So industrial sector, most of the commodities that are manufactured in the industrial sector, the seller, if it is having the inelastic demand, the seller can charge higher price, and anyway, given though the sales is low, no problem. But if the commodity is having the elastic demand, the seller can reduce the price and increase the sales. See, for example, there are certain commodities. You take Benz car. So let us compare the Benz cars with Maruti Altos. So I need not to explain much. What is you all know what is the difference here. Benz cars might not be selling that much. The sales volume might not be that much, but then price will compensate. High price will compensate. But Maruti Altos, the price is not very high, but the seller can compensate himself by increasing the sales. So most of the industrial commodities, this is what happening. But it is not possible in the agricultural sector. Okay, why it is not possible in the agricultural sector? As even after the harvest or bumper crop, the farmers cannot get more revenue, even though the output will be more. Okay, so why this is happening? Even when the bumper crop is there, the sales should be more, and in that way, even though the price is reducing, the sales should increase and compensate the farmer. But that is not possible in the agricultural sector because they cannot increase the sales as the agricultural goods are having the inelastic demand. What is happening here? Most of the time throughout the season, only during the harvesting season they are having the output. All the other remaining seasons, because of the climatic conditions and all, the volume of output is very very low. So during those period of time, anyway they are not having any output, they are not getting any revenue. But at least after the harvesting season, they are having the plenty of goods in the market, they can sell the commodity in the market and they can increase the revenues, and that is also not being possible for the farmer. Because what is happening here, when the goods are arriving after the harvest, when the produce is more after the harvest, the price is decreasing but the sales are not increasing because the agricultural commodities is having the inelastic demand. Even though the prices are increasing, the demand will not increase. That is inelastic demand. Remember, food grains we cannot consume just because the prices have reduced. We cannot consume plate after plate of meals, isn't it? So even after the bumper crop is happening also, that is plenty, the farmers are in the poorest situation only, in poverty. That is poverty in the midst of plenty. So poverty, low revenue due to low price after too much supply. Anyway, after the harvest, the supply is too much, the price is reducing, and in the midst of plenty, the supply of goods are abundant. So in spite of that, the farmers are in the poverty. That's why this is why it is happening, because this paradox is explained because the agricultural commodities are having the inelastic demand. Okay, now next, finally, to the producers. The producers has to decide about the volume of output, how much output they have to produce and sell, or in other words, what should be the supply of a commodity. So let us take an example. The seller can produce two goods, can be produced and sold by a seller with his limited resources. So with his limited resources, he has to decide whether this resource has to be diverted or used for the production of good X or for the production of good Y. Okay, now let us assume good X is having elastic demand. So elastic demand, the producer will get only less revenue because he cannot increase the price. And if the good Y is having the inelastic demand, what the producer can do, he can get more revenue as the sales will not decrease even though the prices are high. So what the producer will do, he will charge high price and will realize more revenue because the demand is not going to decrease. So he wants to take the advantage of that. So he will divert the resources for the production of good Y. So the volume of output and sales will be more towards good Y instead of good X, because good X is having the inelastic demand. The producer will realize only lesser revenue because if he increases the sales, the price will come down. Okay, but whereas it is having something inelastic demand, here even though the increase the sales, if the volume of output is increased, he need not have to reduce the price. He need not have to reduce the price because that commodity Y is having inelastic demand. So to a certain extent, he can increase the sales also at a higher price. So the producer would divert his resources for the production of good Y to take advantage of its inelastic demand. Okay, so these are all some of the areas the concept of elasticity of demand is useful. I briefly explained. Now let us move to the main answer. SAQ 17, point out the importance of price elasticity of demand. Answer, ceteris paribus. See, normally ceteris paribus means I have mentioned in the bracket. The moment you say ceteris paribus, it is other factors remaining constant. You have to, in the answer, you have to explain the meaning of elasticity of demand. That's what I have mentioned here. Okay, so ceteris paribus, that is other factors remaining constant. The percentage change in quantity demanded due to a percentage change in price is known as price elasticity of demand. This you already know, isn't it? There are several uses of price elasticity of demand for government and business, especially in decision making. Some of them are, first one, monopoly market. The monopolist can practice price discrimination to earn maximum profit based on elasticity of demand. He can charge lower price in an elastic market and a higher price in an inelastic market for the same product and can maximize its profit. Okay. Second one, joint products. The concept of elasticity of demand is useful to fix the prices of joint products like meat and fur, sugar and molasses, etc., whose separate costs cannot be easily calculated. In such cases, the producer will fix a higher price for goods with inelastic demand and lower price for goods with elastic demand. Then the third one, government. It helps the government to nationalize. Nationalize means I told you, taking over from the private sector. To nationalize some of the essential public welfare services like Indian Railways, which are having inelastic demand, by declaring them as public utilities. Okay. Fourth one, international trade. The terms of trade, which means the rate at which one unit of domestic commodity will be exchanged for a unit of foreign commodity between two countries, can be determined based on mutual elasticities of demand for their products. Fifth one, Ministry of Finance. The Finance Ministry can select those goods and services which are having inelastic demand while levying taxes to realize the tax revenue. Sixth one, management. The trade unions can demand higher wages for workers only if the demand for workers by the management is inelastic. If it is elastic, the efforts of the trade unions to raise the wages for their workers will not be successful. Seventh one, poverty in midst of plenty. The concept of elasticity of demand explains the paradox of poverty. Paradox, I repeat again, is something unexplainable. That is poverty in the midst of plenty in the agricultural sector. The farmers are not able to realize more revenue even after the reduction of prices due to bumper crop of food grains. This is due to inelastic demand for food grains. Finally, eighth one, producers. Volume of output to be produced can be decided by the producers based on elasticity of demand. If the demand for the commodity is inelastic, that is good, why I explained to you, isn't it? The producer might increase the supply of that commodity instead of good X to get more profit, as charging higher prices would not reduce their demand. Okay, so thus you can see the concept of elasticity of demand has several theoretical and practical advantages. Okay, hope you have understood the concept. This is also one of the very important 5 marks question. If you have any doubts, please mention them in the comment box. Okay, otherwise if you find this video useful, please like, share and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, until my next class, take care. Bye bye.